Recording. We are recording now. Does it show recording on your screen, by the way?
I think it should, because that'd be kind of sneaky.
No, but I can hit record.
Oh
no, it does say recording. Yeah, top left.
It does? Okay,
oh,
good.
there it is. Okay. Yeah.
Why don't we all hit record? Oh, record permission. Request record permission from the meeting host. This way we can have backups.
It didn't ask me though.
Yeah, I get the little.
So how do I ask?
I don't know. All right, whatever. It's going to the cloud anyway.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, here we go. And welcome back to another episode of This Week in Photo. I'm your host, Frederick Van Johnson. We've got an all-star cast today lined up to discuss some of the cool things happening in the world of photography. We've got Miss Nicole Z and Nicole S. Young. Nicole, you have like 3 names now, right? You got Nicole, Nicole S. Young, Nicole Z, and then you got Brian's last name in there somewhere too.
I didn't take his name when we got married because it would confuse me.
Got it.
So I was like, I'll just stick with my other name.
I'm going to stick with Nicole Z because that's
fine. I should just do a legal change.
You just go to Nicole Z. Yeah, it's all good. All right, well, cool. We also have Mr. Don Komarechka on the show. What's up, Don?
Hey, Frederick. Oh, not too much. Just always way too busy and so many things this time of the year. It's crazy. And I've got a very interesting project that I'm working on for the BBC. And I don't know if I can say too much about it, but I'm pretty excited. So.
Okay, but you can tell us you're working on something exciting.
Yes, exactly.
I'm going to guess it has something to do with snowflakes, but I have no inside information.
That would be a good guess, yes.
I'm going to guess photography. How about that?
I'm going to guess something British.
There you go. All right, that other voice you heard is Mr. Joseph Linaschke, a.k.a. Photo Joseph. What's up, Joseph?
Greetings, sir. Well, I've taken a little detour to be on the show off of the Lumix Shoot Anything tour with our boy Julio, who's hanging out in the other room.
Yep, and you're at lynda.com HQ right now, right?
I am.
But you're doing 3 things. So you're on tour. You're on tour with Julio. You're recording a Lynda title, and you're on TWiP right now.
Well, we're here for a test, for a little screen test for an upcoming series that I'm doing.
Oh.
And then Julie and I were doing another test for a potential thing. So,
okay. Well, look at all the secrecy. All these potential things and BBC and all this. Come on, what is it?
It was all potential, just in case it doesn't work out. Then we don't have to, say, but you said it was.
Got it. And I would, right? So, all right, well, welcome. Also,
just because I'm going to have to take off early, I want to get in my little shout out now. So the Lumix Shoot Anything tour that we're on right now, for anybody who is listening to this on Friday when this show actually comes out, we still have a couple stops in Portland and Seattle after that. Go to lumixlounge.com, look for the big picture of us, or just head to bit.ly/shoot anything, Lumix Shoot Anything, and that'll take you right to the page.
And we'll link to that too. Cool.
Thank you, sir.
All right. And hopefully Mr. Derrick Story doesn't have anything secret that he wants to hide. And tell us that he's working on, but he can't tell us what he's working on. What's going on, Derrick?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thanks for being on the show. We got good stuff here, huh?
Yeah, we did. Thanks to both of you. So originally the show lineup was Nicole and Don, and we're gonna go through everything, which would have been awesome by itself. But you two agreed to join the show late in the game because Apple kind of pulled the curtain back on something, which we're going to talk about at the time.
Yeah, we are going to talk about that. Yeah, that little thing that happened.
That little crazy little thing called Photos. We're going to talk about.
Well, I just got back in town. I was in Cuba, and I can talk about that. So that was a blast. I was in Havana for 2 weeks.
Oh, nice. Did you bring back any cigars?
Oh yeah.
Nice. Legally now, right? Legally.
Yeah. Right before I left, literally right before I left, they changed. They made the rule change on cigars and rum.
So, wow.
Did you bring back both?
Oh God, yeah.
Derrick,
come on, man.
I'd like to remind you, Derrick, that I'll be seeing you a day after tomorrow.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, so whenever you go to Cuba, you leave a lot of stuff for people, right? Because, they need medical supplies, all that. So you take a lot of stuff. But that's only half of it. The other half is you're making room for rum and cigars. So it's really, it works both ways.
I love it.
It's a beautiful,
I love it.
Beautiful.
You should just bring an empty suitcase and a credit card,
You can't use any of that in Cuba, though. You can't use credit card. It's all cash.
A suitcase filled with cash.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's literally what I had to do because I had cash to pay people and all that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you're carrying around far more cash than we're normally comfortable doing.
All right. Well, let's. Speaking of cash, I want to thank our first sponsor for this.
My God.
Oh my God! That was perfect. I could not have set that segue. All right, our first sponsor for this episode of TWiP is our good friends over at FreshBooks. That was perfect, Derrick. Thank you. All right, guys, let's jump into story number one. So, like we kind of hinted at a few minutes ago, Apple has finally pulled the wraps off, at least for the developers, the wraps off their new Photos app. And we've talked about this on the show when they first sort of killed Aperture and unexpectedly, and Joseph, both of you guys, Derrick and Joseph, came on to talk about what the ramifications of that might be and what this new mecha, and all-seeing, all-knowing Photos app might be. So let's just kick it off with Joseph, since you got to go soon. Let's kick it off with you. So the Photos app, here's the pointed question to Joseph Linaschke, previously the Aperture expert, now the Photos expert, also known as Photo Joseph. Does the Photos app live up to your expectations after the demise of Aperture?
Unfortunately, yes.
Oh, unfortunately.
Low expectations, huh?
I know.
Well, it is exactly what I expected it to be. I maybe had a little bit of inside info, but it certainly was what I expected it to be. That's a great app for a lot of users, but absolutely not for the professional market, not yet. The party line has always been, it's going to grow, but looking at what it is right now, I have a hard time seeing this ever truly replacing Aperture.
Really? Wow. So, okay. So if it continues to sort of evolve, so this is going to be like a version 1, obviously, that we're going to see. And then, it will mature up through version 3, 4, et cetera. At that maturity level, do you still think it won't be in other words, is it on a trajectory to eat the lunch of Lightroom and, the rest of the guys, or is it just completely gone consumer?
Well, I think it's gone consumer, prosumer. I think it's going to get most of the features that most of the people use. But when you look at things like tethering, advanced metadata control, ability to create custom metadata fields, these kind of things that are not useful to the vast majority of the people, but certainly are to some, I really don't think those things are going to find their way into there. And I don't think that the extensions architecture will allow other third parties to add it, unlike adding things like curves or fancy filters or whatever. Yeah. I don't see that happening.
Yeah. So I'm feeling disappointment in the tone of your voice there.
Did you get that?
I got that a little bit. So you're disappointed. Huh? That's disheartening. So a lot of people are just going to be like, okay, now what? Is the Photos app kind of the marketing campaign for moving over to Lightroom now?
Well, let's ask that question again at the end of this segment. Let's get other people's wade in, and then we'll see how that conversation turns.
All right. Well, cool. Derrick, so you have the ball. What do you think? I got a lukewarm kind of wah from Joseph. What do you think?
Well, I don't think Joseph's going to go to Photos, Joseph. I can guess that already.
I don't think so. Yeah.
Stick with Photo. He's pretty spot on. What we're looking at is a iPhoto replacement. And so if you're an iPhoto user, you should be thrilled, because this is a definite step up from iPhoto. There's a lot of really cool features, and plus the code on iPhoto is so old and so crufty that the performance wasn't there. This app was written from the ground up. It's speedy. It can handle large libraries. It's connected. You can establish a special library in your Photos environment that is shared across all OS 10 computers that you have iCloud access to, and your iOS devices. And you can have other libraries too. You can still have multiple libraries, but one of them will be your cloud library, and you can dump as much in there as you have storage in iCloud. In iCloud, not iCloud Drive. It's iCloud. In this case, they're not going to put it in the drive, at least not right now. So it's, for iPhoto users, it's a bonanza, I think, and they should be excited. Aperture users, quite frankly, even Apple is saying, you need to think about what you're going to do.
They're like, thanks for waiting for this pro application to replace Aperture. Now go do something else.
Yeah, your Aperture library will, upgrade into Photos for sure. But as Joseph was pointing out, a lot of the features that I love, that he loves, and quite honestly, people within Apple that use Aperture love, just aren't going to be there. And so you need to figure out, what you're going to do. Now, we have time to do that. Aperture, the RAW updates, the way Apple handles RAW updates, they're system-wide. So, they have to keep doing the RAW updates because they're going to support whatever, their photo management apps are. And so as long as Aperture is system compatible, it's usable, and it'll even continue to get the RAW updates that they do. So, it's not like you have to do something tomorrow. Yosemite is a nice platform, and Aperture runs great on it. But at some point, my suspicion is, and Apple won't comment on this part of it, Aperture won't be supported in an OS, and so then you're forced with the situation of moving on to something else. Phase 1, Lightroom, DxO 10, ProOptics 10, whatever it happens to be.
Yeah.
Or taking a machine and just freezing it in time. And
there you go.
Literally
doing the Han Solo and Carbonite thing with your photo library.
This machine will get the latest version of Yosemite, and so it shall be. And then you just plug that into your Drobo, and just go as long as it runs. So it's an interesting time, and I think for hardcore Aperture users, it's a difficult time. I think a lot of us thought that Photos would probably be a little bit more transition friendly for Aperture users than it's turned out to be.
Yeah. Nicole, what about you? I'm not sure what you're using on the digital asset management side, but I'm sure you saw this release. Did you get excited when you saw Photo?
No.
Everybody starts with that.
I use Lightroom, so this doesn't affect me personally, but I do a lot of teaching, so I'm sure I'll learn the program when it's out, so that way I'm at least educated on it. But it doesn't really surprise me. Apple is trying to appeal to the consumers because there are millions and millions and millions of consumers versus, maybe a small percentage of those. All the people that use iOS and Mac computers are enthusiasts and professional photographers. And it doesn't scale. It doesn't make sense for them, like financially, probably. Obviously, I'm totally guessing on all this, but it doesn't make sense to create a high-end professional software program that competes with what Adobe already has when they can create something that they know almost everyone of their users are probably going to use. And, but then again, if I kind of step back and look at this from I love photography and I want everyone to love photography, maybe this is going to be like a gateway drug into post-processing for people who have only just taken pictures with their iPhone and just posted them straight to Facebook or whatever their social sharing of choices. Now they can use Photos and do a few things, and then maybe they'll go, "Wow, this is cool. What else can I do?" And then maybe that'll kind of move them on to other things. But for professionals and enthusiasts, because I don't like to say professionals because we're all enthusiasts, and there are people who use professional tools and they're enthusiasts and they don't do it professionally. So pretty much everyone listening right now is who I'm talking about. Yeah. We will still continue to use the more, I guess, high-end programs, the things that allow us more control over our photographs. And Photos is just going to be another app. It's like iPhoto. The only time it ever opens up is when I accidentally open it or I plug in a card and I realize that I forgot to disable the don't open when when I plug a card. And I'm like, I don't want to see you. I don't care about you. And so it'll be interesting to see actually what it is and how it works. But
I'd like to jump on to something that Nicole said, actually, that I think is important, in that the Photos app is designed in kind of this layered approach, in and so that if you're a novice, you can jump in and you can just use, let's say, the image editing tools on a real basic level. But then you can open them up, and then there's an intermediate level, and then you can open them up again, and you go down, and instead of having the program make all the choices for you, you actually have highlights and shadows, and you have definition and all that sort of stuff.
You can drill down and have more control.
You have more control. So it's actually, that part of it's kind of neat in the sense that, you could come into it as a novice and actually grow with the application and actually learn how those different tools work. So, and that part of it, I think her point's a really good one.
Yeah. Don Komarechka, I don't want to leave you out here. I know you're a Windows user, so you probably don't care much about the Photos app, but you are one of the smartest people I know, and you read this. What did you think? Were you like, see, I told you so, Mac users?
No, but I think that Apple has created a product that hits the target audience of that product perfectly. I mean, it is guided right towards the everybody, the everyday photographer, anybody with a phone, a digital camera of any kind that doesn't want to get into the very complex editing workflows that would exist in more advanced pieces of software. And they just want to do it quickly, and they want to get a decent job for a very small amount of time and with pretty much no learning curve. It did have some interesting features. I was looking through some of the screenshots. It looked like it had a very good levels controller to get in there and fine tune some of your white and black points and some tonality. But like everybody's been saying, it is a far cry from what the next version of Aperture would have been. I don't think Apple is going in that direction anymore, and they're focusing on something else. They're doing a very good job for what it is, but it isn't Aperture.
Joseph, when we first talked about this, the promise and the excitement that I saw was like there was this talk of a plug-in based architecture whereby you could essentially replicate Lightroom inside. You guys remember this, right? You could replicate Lightroom or the Lightroom functionality inside of this mythical new Photos app that was coming based on, Yosemite. So what happened to all that? Is that gone?
Well, we don't really know yet, but the idea of what you're talking about, for anyone who didn't hear the earlier show or doesn't remember this, it's called extensions. It's the extension architecture. And the idea is that with Photos, you have the ability, or will have the ability, to have other apps that plug in. They're not plugins anymore. They're called extensions, but basically extend the capability of the app. The thing is that we don't know at this point what level that will be, because the SDK is not out yet. I was talking to folks at MacFun who are really, really eager to take their apps and plug them in as extensions, because all of their apps do things that Photos absolutely does not do. So that's perfect, right? They got a really advanced retouching tool. They've got an advanced black and white tool and a bunch of other stuff. And their apps are perfectly suited to this. But they don't even know to what level they can do it yet, because they don't have the SDK.
Yeah.
And the idea, the kind of dream vision that we all had when this was first announced, was that Aperture was the best asset management system that we had, way better than what's in Lightroom. And I've been playing with Lightroom, and there's no question. Aperture's asset management beats the snot out of what Lightroom's got.
Yeah.
Its image editing tools weren't so great compared, but the asset management was great. So if we translated that to Photos and said, right, Apple's really good at asset management, let them do that part of it, and then let everybody else make all the image editing plugins, extensions, apps, whatever, then we'll all be happy. The thing is, now when we look at Photos, its asset management, while obviously it could grow, is really basic right now. And in fact, one of the things, I just wanted to read some of the bullet points from the reviewer's guide. So I'm just going to read this straight from here. It says, some metadata like star ratings, color labels, and flags will automatically be transformed into keywords and searchable in the new Photos app. Translation: you do not have star ratings, color labels, or flags in Photos. How any photographer who's doing more than just family stuff is supposed to sort through their work when they can't flag or rate or label their photos is beyond me. Now, obviously that can get added, but that's a really, really fundamental feature to be missing.
Pretty basic, yeah.
I would say for me, Lightroom is more, the organizational aspects of Lightroom are more important to me than the develop module, because I am always looking for my photos, organizing my photos, sorting my photos more than I'm actually processing them, it seems like. So I would die if I lost that, and I can't imagine not being able to use that like inside of Photos.
Well, especially for
what do you guys think about the whole idea? Sorry, Derrick. Derrick, so to you, why don't you take this? What do you think about the idea of I'm going to play sort of in defense of the guys in Cupertino here with this app release, because you guys are picking on them. So
I thought it was
I
going to
feel
be the other
bad
way
for
around. I thought it was
this
going to be
poor little company. You guys keep picking on them. So I'm feeling deja vu from when Final Cut 10 was announced. And it went from being this pro, all the pros loved it, to iMovied Final Cut Pro. It's now a consumer app and all this. We're saying the same things here, right? And now Final Cut 10 is pretty dang good, right? And they basically added it back in, all those features that everybody was griping about. Could that be happening here too? So they're going to take the cruft for consumerizing the app and then make it eventually something much more than it is today?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think they're fine with taking, the cruft. I mean, they're always had a really thick skin that way.
Yeah.
But I think this is even a little bit different than that, because Final Cut 10 has really evolved back pretty nicely. It's a kind of a cool app now.
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. And then what Joseph was talking about, where we thought there was going to be this open architecture. I think part of that was implied, and I think part of it we were connecting dots we shouldn't have connected. Yeah.
Well, I don't necessarily agree. If it's coming, but we just don't know the extent that it's coming.
Well, right now the official word is, obviously they never comment on, future stuff. Right now, and what is going to be released, it will not be there. The only thing that will be in the official release is shared open architecture, where you can share stuff, but not the other stuff. So
that's going to be set for the actual release.
Yeah, that's what's being said right now, as of today.
I'd love to know where you heard that. That's information I really need. You can shoot that to me after the show, please.
Okay. Yeah. So but everything is subject to change after that, and who knows? It may even be subject to change before that. But that is the official word as of today, which is a direct question I asked, because I had been talking about the open architecture. I thought it was going to be there.
Yeah.
And I thought it was just a matter of time. As of right now, I need to stop talking about it.
Yeah.
So that really puts us in the position where I don't know if it's going to even go down the path of Final Cut 10, to answer your question.
I would say not likely, given that Final Cut Pro was billed as a pro product, even though most pros poo-pooed it and said this isn't a pro product right now. And I even said at the time that they shouldn't have called it Final Cut Pro. If they just called it Final Cut, left Final Cut Pro alone for a year or two, and then added the pro nomiker when it was ready, it would have been fine. But this is not being billed as a pro app. It's being billed as a consumer app.
Correct.
So,
now the good thing is they did leave Aperture alone, so I mean we can still use Aperture. So
for now,
so there's definitely some positives here. But,
so I want to another thing that this brings up is there's companies like, what was one of the last trade shows? There's this company called Mylio, whom I brought on the show, and I interviewed them, and whom I think we're going to release that soon, that interview with them. But their claim to fame sounds very similar to what this Photos app is going to do, in terms of you having a library that's synchronized across all of your computers and your devices, and you make a change on one and it ripples down to the other ones, and simplification of all that. So Mylio is doing that. Is this basically, is Apple just appling Mylio? I mean, what do you guys think? Don, you want to jump in?
Well, I might not be the best one to answer this, but I think that Apple right now is, and I think Derrick hit on a very interesting point too, when he mentioned Final Cut 10 and how it was promoted to professionals, but there was all sorts of things that the professionals were saying back, saying, this is not really for us. And I think that Apple is trying to hit a completely different market than they used to. And whether or not they're trying to mimic other software or other programs, they've got an audience. They know exactly what that audience needs. And unfortunately now, it's no longer the professionals. They're leaving that to other people to fill in the gaps.
Yeah, it's a business decision. They're making the right decision for Apple. There's no question about that.
Right.
It just leaves a lot of the pros with a bad taste in their mouth. And unfortunately, if Photos isn't going to replace Aperture, then you have no choice but to go somewhere else, and that's very, very unfortunate.
Yeah,
and I think what we're seeing everyone kind of go in the same direction, right? We have Adobe with their Creative Cloud, we have Mylio, we have Apple now that's going to be using iCloud. So I mean, everyone is moving towards being able to use the cloud to manage your assets.
Mhm.
And in Apple's case, you can manage them in the cloud, and you can also manage them on external drives, all that sort of stuff. So you'll have all those options. But I mean, I think that's a push that we're seeing overall, Frederick. And again, for consumers, I think it's pretty cool. But for guys like me and you and Joseph and Don and Nicole that shoot, a whole bunch of raw files,
Right.
that I'm not so sure that for us, and we are the minority, granted, I think something else has to come.
Well, I will say too, Derrick, to that point though, I'll never use Aperture or iPhoto or Photos for that matter. But the fact that Aperture is no longer being updated hurts Lightroom users because now there's no direct competition to it. There's nothing really pushing things forward. There's nobody saying, oh, well, why can't we have this feature or that feature in Lightroom because it's over here? There's no incentive to really push the bar up.
Especially if people, and I'm not a advocate or against the Creative Cloud, but if people are continually paying the Creative Cloud, then there's always that, well, how much of an incentive is there if they're already getting paid every month to increase? I'm pretty certain that they're going to be making updates and hopefully improving Lightroom, but that's a really good point because where else are people going to go if Lightroom disappeared? I think most of us would just be like, maybe this is that time. It's kind of one of those like hinges where all of a sudden something else is going to come out.
That's what I was thinking. It feels like there's a vacuum right now in the photo space where somebody could come in with something brilliant and just knock everyone's socks off and say, okay, we've taken the best of what all these other guys are doing and we've listened to you and here it is. Have at it,
But I think to make that product the one that really replaces what Aperture was, and let's say Lightroom's gone, what Lightroom was, that's going to be a product that's very, very high end, very pro for very niche market. Not many people are going to need it, and to have that kind of feature set in there, they're going to have to charge a lot of money for it. So we're going to be back to the days of paying $1,000 for a piece of software because it's only a couple hundred or a couple thousand of us that are actually going to buy it.
Yeah.
Which that's fine if that's what it takes to get the right software. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of companies may not understand. We as professionals, we're willing to pay for it. If it costs $1,000 to get software that does the job, I'll pay for it. God knows I spend a lot of money on hardware and everything else that I do. It's just a business expense. It's what it needs to be. But I need the features.
So photographers looking at this app, both of you guys, Nicole and Joseph, looking at this app, how does it fit into, and does Photos.app fit into your workflow? Like, will you use this?
I think so. I think I absolutely will. No, I know that I will. I mean, I use Photos on my phone every day. Yeah. Right. It's a wonderful system. It's beautiful. The way that it works is fantastic. It just doesn't have the features that I need as a working professional. But I want the photos in the cloud. I want access to my favorite photos on any device everywhere I go. I want to be able to make the books and calendars and all that other stuff. That's all neat. That's great and cool, and I'll use it. But it cannot be my primary source for photos. So that means that I have to come up with a workflow where I'm using whatever other software and can somehow push stuff over to Photos and have to come up with a workflow that's not going to make me pull my hair out.
Yeah, that sounds like a Linda title in the making, right there.
I already have the contract for it.
Joseph, too late, man. Derrick was emailing as we were recording.
Yeah. That one was done a long time ago. But to answer, I want to answer your question too.
Go for it. Go ahead.
I'm going to use Photos. I mean, no doubt about it. I'm going to use it. But much along the lines of what Joseph is saying is that it's not going to be my professional workflow, but I'm going to find a way, I don't know, using Automator or whatever, I'm going to find a way for those JPEGs that are, output from my work and everything to flow into Photos so that propagate across all my devices. Because how cool is that? And then being able to, like on the iPad, touch something up and have it, propagate over to my iPhone and back to my Mac and all that. When you're showing off your stuff and doing sharing and all those kind of things that we do as lovers of photography, which we all are. I mean, we're professionals, but we're also fans of photography. Yeah. That stuff's cool, and I'm actually looking forward to doing that part of it. I just have this other problem to solve in the meantime.
It's that little small
little thing,
We're the pros. What do we do?
Yeah.
Nicole, you were going to say something?
It's gone already.
It's gone.
It's gone.
Well, in the defense of Mileo, those guys, I'm sure that this was a shot across their bow or directly at their bow, you know. But I'm looking at their page right now. One of the things that occurred to me is the synchronizing, or the sort of spreading all the changes in synchronicity across all of your devices is awesome. What Mylio does that Apple doesn't do is synchronize other brands like Windows and Android and all that stuff. So now you can have with Mylio, you can have a cloud with everything that you choose to use, not just Mac stuff, and have it be in sync. But if you're everything you have is in the Mac ecosystem, then it makes a lot of sense to use Photos, I think. I don't know. Derrick, what about can you, both of you guys, Derrick and Joseph, you guys are the experts on this. Can you, for the folks that are like, okay, you guys have been talking about how good it is, take us just through the basics of what Photos.app is. Like for me, I'm thinking, I like this synchronizing thing, but do I need to set up rules so that my raw files don't get pushed over to my tablet? Or can I just say this gallery goes to my iPhone and only at this resolution? Like, what does it do for me?
I'll just start, and I'll let Joseph go too. Basically, you're going to choose one library. That's the library that propagates. Okay. So you'll have, your special library, and that will go to all your devices that are Yosemite or newer, or iOS or 8 or newer. And then however they go in is, remember, this is iCloud. So it's iCloud is iCloud, right? So they can come in from different angles, and everything's going to work together. So you're not going to have kind of that stringent workflow that we were stuck with before. You take a card, put it in, you know what I mean? They can come in a lot of different doors. Then beyond that, it's I think it's kind of what the lack of star ratings is just like a knife to my heart. I mean, so that's a huge problem. So that right away forces me to think about it a little bit differently. But beyond that, then I think it'd be more or less a normal environment.
Joseph, what about you? You want to take us through your thoughts on just the basics of what this thing is?
Sure. So the best camera to be using with Photos is going to be your iPhone, because that's where you're going to get the most metadata, that even though you can't see the metadata, but that's the most metadata that's going to be useful for searching, for organizing your photos, and for location tagging. So, the iPhone obviously has got GPS, you got GPS enabled, and all those photos show up in a location. And so you can see your photos on the map, which is just a super cool thing to be able to do. You can sort by time, by clear word searches. You can just start typing in things like Japan or Frederick, and you've got faces in there, so you find the pictures of Frederick. You type in Japan, you find pictures taken in Japan. All of that is designed to be seamless. And the only camera that makes it seamless is using an iPhone, or at least some other GPS-enabled camera where you always have that metadata in there. But all of those pictures are everywhere, right? So you don't have, other than marking as favorites and setting up some albums, you don't have this, as Derrick said, I only want these photos to show up on the cloud or on my phone. They're just all there. Yeah. And the ability to kind of zoom in and out of hundreds of thousands of photos it's really cool, and it is definitely a cool way to view your images. But again, it's not what the professionals need. But for the consumer, it's a great experience. You can easily scroll through tons and tons of photos and quickly find the ones that you want based off of things like clear language searching for the pictures taken at Disneyland, Dad's birthday, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I have a question for you guys. I'm sorry, I didn't interrupt you, Joseph.
I was just saying, then the editing tools, there's, as I think Derrick already explained, there's great editing tools where you start off with some very basic levels, and then you can dive deeper and deeper into them. And once we presumably get the extensions, although it sounds like there might be some changes of that I didn't know about, that we can open up the box even farther. But yeah. That's about it. Go ahead.
Yeah. So all these photos that everyone's going to be syncing. I mean, if I could look in my photo on my phone, and I probably have over 1,000 photos just sitting there. Yeah. And every once in a while, I push them all into my computer and I delete them to clear up space on my phone. But if I'm using Photos, do I have to pay for all of these photos to sit in the cloud somewhere? If I have, let's say I have 5,000 photos, and 20 gigs of space or something.
Well, 5,000 is nothing, but 100,000, sure.
Let's say I decided to sync all my raw photos or something. Yeah. Like, how does that work for people who do want to use it?
It's the same iCloud structure as anything else. So you get first 5 gigs free, and then they have the pricing tiers beyond that up to 1 TB. So so in that case, it's just like a regular iCloud scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Don, your workflow here, you're our token Windows user on the panel here. So tell us what's your workflow and because you're dealing with large images and masses of images all the time. So what's the flow that a typical Windows user might go through?
Yes. Well, I mean, in my case, I'm not the typical Windows user, but
it's atypical Windows user.
It's harder to say that there's a typical Windows user compared to a typical Mac user. It's a little bit more fractured and fragmented in the Windows side of things. Yeah. But I might bring in a memory card that is like a 256 gig card that's completely full, and then I download that, and then I go out and I shoot some more. There is a lot of images constantly running through. Now, not all of those raw files I necessarily need to have access to everywhere. Now, I might want to have access to a core selection of maybe images that I'm currently working on, or finished works that I might need to sort of resize for different purposes or different clients. And so I can see there being a use, in the Apple side to have a separate library or catalog, whatever their terminology will be, to have that. For me, it all goes into a folder on my computer that is then onto a Drobo that can then be accessed by any computers in my household. But I don't necessarily need all of that stuff when I'm out and about. Like my home office is really a central location, and most of the heavy lifting is done on a desktop computer. If I need anything that has to be sort of remote, then I'll log into my desktop computer, and I'll even use my desktop computer remotely. And then that seems to work just fine because I don't need to have everything in real time on every device around the world with me.
Yeah. Nicole, what about you? Your workflow? I mean, I know you're a Lightroom user, but what's the take us through like a 30,000 foot view of Nicole out and about with her iPhone versus when you whip out the Canon?
Sure. Well, with my iPhone, I take a lot of photos with my phone, and any photo that I take with my phone, I actually have an if this then that setup. And I wrote a blog post about this. I can give you the link if you want.
Yes.
So then when my phone connects to Dropbox or Carousel, I think I have a Carousel thing now. When those connect, then it uploads all of my photos from my phone, all the ones that haven't been uploaded, to a folder in Dropbox. And then Lightroom, I have it set up so that Lightroom on my main computer will do an auto import straight to my Lightroom catalog. So all of my iPhone photos are backed up to my Lightroom catalog, which is on my Drobo.
Oh, nice.
So that's how my iPhone stuff, because I do pull a lot of my iPhone photos and I use them for articles or books or things like that. I do a lot of behind the scenes photos with my iPhone and things like that.
Yep. By the way, your geek cred went up like 10 points because you use if this then that. So
it's a great. I
love it. This and that.
It's so awesome. I use it, and here's just a little side note.
Yeah.
When I post to Instagram, I have an if this then that recipe that will automatically pull the photo and post the photo onto my Twitter instead of just a link to Instagram. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Say that again.
I got that from you. That is awesome.
Yeah. So if let's say you do the normal thing, you post a photo on Instagram and you sync it to Facebook, you sync it to Twitter, right?
Yes.
It goes to Twitter and it says, hey, this and this and that. Then there's a link. You have to click on the link to actually see the photo on Instagram.
Yes.
Of course, it's great when people go to your Instagram because then maybe they'll follow you, et cetera, et cetera. However, I like to see photos in my Twitter feed. So I set it up so that way whenever I post a photo to Instagram, I don't connect it to Twitter. Instead, if this then that, will find that photo on Instagram and automatically post it to Twitter and pull the photo and actually post the photo to Twitter.
Okay, so, and that's an if this then that recipe that you wrote, right?
It is, and I have a blog post on that too.
I need that blog post.
I will send you the blog post. It has a link to the recipe, so you don't even have to set it up yourself.
I need that.
Okay. I forgot. We were talking about my workflow.
Yeah, Canon side. Yeah.
So with Canon workflow, let's say I'm home and I do a food shoot. I plug the card into my computer, I import the photos.
That's it. But no cloud.
Pretty basic.
There's no cloud involved.
No, I don't. I have a few. I use Lightroom Mobile for a few things. It's not as integrated into my workflow as maybe it could be, but it's there. It has a couple portfolio folders and catalogs and whatnot, or collections. I'm sorry, collections. So. Yeah.
Love it. All right, guys. We've been diving into this. So I want to thank our second sponsor for this episode of This Week in Photo, and that's our good friends over at lynda.com, where Joseph happens to be sitting right now. All right, let's continue this discussion. This is huge. We had a bunch of other stuff in the show notes to talk about, but this a big move like this by one of the most important tech companies on the planet only happens, once a quarter. It happens a lot, but this is an important application. So I'm really thankful to have you guys on here to help hammer it to death. So let's end it with this, or this particular side of it. When you're looking at this app, right, and we'll start with you, Derrick. When you're looking at this app, people that are sitting there on the fence, and I'm asking this because I already know the answer to the question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. People are saying, you know what? Okay, I've waited. These are the Aperture people, right? I've waited. I've waved the flag while Frederick was talking bad about Aperture for all these years, and I was still holding on. I was holding the fort and fighting off the people, and now this happens. What do those people do, Derrick? What do you suggest they do?
Find a new app. It's unfortunate. We're in that boat. People at Apple are in that boat.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's a lot of folks in that boat. And, I thought that the transition to photos would be better for Aperture users than it's turned out. And, we were wrong. We were wrong on that. So, so now we got to look. Now we got to look around and figure out what to do.
But you have suggestions on where to go? Don't just tell them to go, hey, we know you're hungry. Go find some food.
No, what I'm hearing a lot of good things about, actually, and, this is cropping up a lot in discussions, is phase one. A lot of folks are really, really high on phase one. They said, if you haven't looked at it in a long time, you really need to look at it, because it's really folks that have moved over to it are just seem to be very much in love with it. Mm-hmm. So I would say, that is one thing. If you're not a huge fan of Lightroom and you want to see something else, I would look at phase one also.
It's Capture One is the name of their software, right?
Yeah.
Capture One. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll link to that as well. Joseph, what about you? Like, if you could give advice to the from putting on your old retired Aperture expert hat, and you want to tell the troops, you want to give that speech to the troops after they've lost the battle on,
wow.
You gave it your all. But sometimes the overwhelming force of the enemy is just too much. So what do you say?
Well, at this point, the answer to that question is exactly what Derrick said. Unfortunately, obviously, Photos isn't going to be the answer, at least not now. And I don't predict, and doesn't sound like Derrick does either, that it will be ready to replace Aperture by the time Aperture virtually expires, which, of course, is when Yosemite goes. We had, then it may be that Aperture will get another refresher, a maintenance release, they call it, when Yosemite revs to whatever's next after Yosemite. But given the state of things, I'd be beyond surprised if that actually happened. Yeah. So at this point, if you're a hardcore Aperture user, it's time to seriously think about moving on. And I don't have the answer yet to what that is, but that answer has to come.
Well, we're going to leave this topic, Joseph, and I know you got to take off in a second here. You have anything to tell us about what's going to happen with ApertureExpert.com? I'm trying to say that without being flippant.
I know. And you've been so good, Frederick. You really have.
You have no idea of the internal battles I'm going through right now.
So, I think most listeners know that, of course, Aperture Expert converted over to the Photos Expert back in September, whenever it was. It was sometime last year. And we still talked about Aperture, but we started leaning to focus on Photos, with Photos for iOS to talk about, and with the idea of talking about all the cool extensions that were going to be coming out for Photos for iOS and eventually Photos for OS X.
Yeah.
So far, we've seen very few apps for Photos for iOS, which has been disappointing. Very few that have plugged into the extensions capability. There's lots of great photography apps on iOS, hundreds, thousands of apps that are fantastic. Yeah. But the vast majority of them, very, very few of them, are actually plugging into Photos.
Right.
So that's disappointing. Sounds like we're not going to have that to talk about on Photos for OS X either. And given the fact that we know now that Aperture users are not going to be able to migrate anytime soon, if at all, The site's going to change again, and it's unfortunate to have to make a change so quickly, but the site is going to take on a new name yet again. It is going to become photoapps.expert.
Cool.
And photoapps.expert is going to talk about photo apps. Those apps will be Aperture, those apps will be Photos and Lightroom and Capture One and whatever else is out there that rocks this world.
I love it. I love it.
That's,
And something else you need to talk about too, right?
Well, yeah, so that's exactly, you and I have been talking for a long time about a podcast that we're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea from the beginning was the podcast would be all around photo apps.
Yep.
And this is now the perfect segue into that. So we will get that podcast started very soon.
Yep.
The podcast will be This Week in Photo Apps, and it will pair perfectly with the website. And it's going to be all about everything that you can do with your photos on software. It doesn't have to be just Mac or iOS, Android, Windows, whatever. If it's photos related, it's fair game.
That's such a great idea.
Yeah, it is, right?
People are always asking, what do I use? Do I use this? Do I use that? That's always the biggest question. People don't know. And that's like the perfect podcast for everyone.
Yeah, yeah. And like with the apps in the App Store, I go in there every now and then. There's like, oh, another gazillion cool apps that I don't have time to try, you know?
And they are.
Yeah.
So cool.
Yeah.
There's some great software there. Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
it's just, yeah, and that's the problem. It's great. And, you know, if a tree falls in the forest and no one hears it, it doesn't make a sound. So we need you to make the sound for these unheard trees, Joseph.
Yeah, absolutely. So the site will be that sounding board. It will be a site dedicated to those. So any developers listening who've got apps running for any platform that are photo related, if it's for photography, I want to know about it. Reach out, talk to me.
Awesome. Cool. All right, man. I know you got to run. We're gonna move on and talk about some new Canon cameras that sport 50 megapixels. You're welcome to stick around, Joseph, if you want to talk about it.
I am going to bow. I've got a drive in front of me. We've got another stop on the Lumix Shoot Anything tour tomorrow up in Palo Alto. We're going to drive partway tonight, get some sleep, get an early start tomorrow, and then hopefully I'm going to see you in town. And for those listeners, again, it's not too late. By the time this comes out, it still won't be too late. The show's still going on. You can come see us in Portland or Seattle, or just check us out online. Every event we are broadcasting live. You can watch the whole thing live every time. All the shows are that are recorded, that are broadcast live, recorded, and they're available as well. Go to lumixlounge.com. It's all there.
Awesome. lumixlounge.com. Cool.
There you go.
All right, man. Well, thanks for coming on, and drive safely.
Thank you very much. Take care, everybody. Great seeing you all.
All right. See you, Joseph.
Take care.
Hey, Joseph.
All right, let's jump on to story number 2, and this is about Canon. As I said, Canon announcing 2 new 50 megapixel cameras. So Nikon kind of pushed the megapixel race forward with that 36 megapixel D800, and then we heard some rumors that Canon was working on how to pack even more pixels onto that sensor, and it looks like they did. So 2 brand new 50 megapixel DSLRs, the 5DS and the 5DSR, officially became the world's highest resolution full frame DSLRs. I'm going to read down some of the feature lists and then we can talk about it. So 50, it's even hard to say that, 50.6 megapixel sensor. You can switch it to a 1.3x 30 megapixel sensor or a 1.6x 19 megapixel crop factor. You can choose between aspect ratios of 1:1, 3:2, 4:3, and 16:9, which is kind of cool. It's got dual digit 6 processors. The ISO range is from 100 to 6400, and it's got things like, that we've seen before, built-in intervalometer and bulb modes, of course. It's got dual card slots, 1 SD and 1 CF, so they're mixing, and redesigned mirror vibration control system, and a new feature called arbitrary release time lag in mirror lock mode. That has got to be the longest feature name ever. And the R edition emits, or it takes the low pass filter off for greater detail at the expense of more array. It's 30.
I don't know if any Canon cameras have had an intervalometer inside of the camera.
No, this is
really?
like,
I think this is like one of the first ones. So
Yeah,
that's
I
I mean, for
I'm
Canon.
thinking Nikon.
Yeah, Nikon's had it forever for some reason.
Yeah.
Canon decided to put it in their largest megapixel sensor.
Oh, interesting. So pricing for these, it's not too bad for 50 megapixels, $36.99 for the 5DS and $38.99 for the 5DSR. So it seems like, Nicole, I want to have you start with this. Seems like these are like the perfect cameras for either studio photographers, food shooters like yourself, or landscape shooters that are intending on blowing things up to wall sized. What do you think?
Yeah, my understanding of this camera is it's not a camera that is for everyone. It's not like, hey, if you shoot the 5D Mark III, then this is your next upgrade. I don't think that's what the intention was. This camera, from my understanding, is for the photographer. Let's say you've got a high-end portrait photographer, and every so often they need a medium format camera.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of having to rent the camera or buy the camera if they can, and have to use a completely different system, they can use this camera that is very low price comparatively, with all the lenses that they already have, and get 50 megapixels with a familiar system. I mean, that's my understanding of what this camera is for.
Yeah.
I use the 5D Mark III. My husband has switched to Sony. He uses the whole mirrorless thing. I know a lot of people, I think the camera got a lot of like, oh, what's Canon doing with the new SLR? They're so behind the times. It's like, look, this is not made for people who want to shoot mirrorless or want to go that direction. This is made for studio photographers.
Yeah.
And I don't plan on upgrading to this camera. But I would gladly use this camera. I'm hoping to get one in my hands within the next couple months, or whenever it's released, to just try it out, and write about it and at least be familiarized with. So it's, it's a lot of megapixels. I don't need 50 megapixels. I think that if I did every single thing I did with 50 megapixels, I would have to back up the Drobos, a foot, 10 feet high or something, because that's a lot of space. The Mark III is like 20, 21, 23, I don't remember. But that I didn't realize that it had the crop factor thing, and that is actually really cool.
I like the crop factor too. I think
1.6 at 19 megapixels. Zooming in, if you're a wildlife photographer and you do landscape, you're not like sacrificing really anything with that.
Yeah.
So
I'm just happy that Canon is throwing a punch. Finally, it's like they've been sitting there dormant while everyone else seems to be doing, not everyone, but a lot of other manufacturers seem to be doing stuff and releasing cameras, making mistakes. Even Nikon, with some of their crazy models that they dropped out, at least they're pushing stuff out.
Mm-hmm.
This is,
and then they're pulling it back in.
Yeah, they pull it. Oops, we didn't mean that. The thing that we said, don't forget about that. I don't know. It's interesting. Don, what about you? I mean, you shoot Canon as well. When you saw this, I mean, and you're one of the people that need all those megapixels, right?
Oh, I would love that many megapixels, but I'm not sure exactly how useful they would be. And to the point about the crop factor that you just mentioned, it would be great if you were shooting at a smaller crop. Basically, what it would be doing is just discarding the pixels at the edge of the sensor and not recording them. Yeah. So wouldn't it be wonderful, and I didn't see this anywhere, that you would have a frame rate increase when you discard those extra pixels, so that for that bird photographer that needs more than 5 frames per second, maybe you could get 8 or 9 when you're shooting in that crop factor. And I don't think they've gotten that. Maybe that's a firmware update down the road. But at that point, why not just take in the whole thing, and then you can choose how to crop it creatively later if you already know you're going to be throwing away the edges, but maybe you want a bit more, for whatever purposes you have. For me, though, I'm always about detail and fine detail and tiny detail. But when you have that many megapixels on a camera, you have to start worrying about diffraction. And so when you're starting to shoot at a small aperture around, at that case, I'm going to guess maybe around f11 or smaller, then light's going to start bending off course, and it's not going to hit the pixel that it should. And it's kind of technical, but you'll get a softness to the image that doesn't do the resolution justice. So you have to understand how to get the most resolution out of a camera like this in order for it to be valuable for you. And for me, I like to push limits. I like to do astrophotography, and I've shot many things at ISO 6400, 12,800 and beyond with a 1DX. It gets noisy, sure, but it can be done. On this camera, it can't be done. So there are a few limiting factors that make it, again, like Nicole had said, it's very good for people in a portrait studio. It's very good for people with very specific uses. But with some of the drawbacks, it's not a camera that I would also go out and buy. I'm very curious to see what they put into the next 1D series camera body, and maybe that will have a good trade-off, a good mix of these two things: a higher resolution but still the faster frame rate, and that the higher ISO settings. It's really interesting. I'm so glad that Canon has done this finally.
Finally, right?
Yeah, Nikon has had this out for ages, and Canon has just been being dragged through the mud with with only 20 megapixels. But people have been wanting more. It's interesting though that they've reduced the frames per second and reduced the ISO, even though they've added in a lot of extra features like the intervalometer, and there's a few other things in there that I think Canon had been missing. So it's good to see whatever they're doing. I want more of it, but I think this is a stepping stone to the next camera purchase that I buy.
Yeah, and you know what, Don? all that stuff that you said about diffraction and how that might lead to degraded image quality, that's exactly why you're hosting the Science of Photography show on the TWiP network.
And it hasn't come out yet, but good things are worth waiting for, right?
That's right. It's got to marinate, it's got to marinate before you let it out. So,
that's so when I tested out, I actually bought the Fuji X-T1, and I was playing with that, and I ran into the issue of diffraction and learning that this camera is not good for me. I was using it as a landscape camera, and all my images felt mushy, and I was like, oh my gosh, I had high hopes for the camera. And then I was like, yeah, that was the issue I was running into. And so it's learning the science. I mean, I'm sure you guys know more about the science than I do, but it's really important to understand those things, because otherwise you're just confused as why things don't.
I remember when I bought the Canon super macro lens that they have, and I was shooting at the 5:1 extreme magnification and dialing it into f16, thinking by standard logic that's going to give me a greater depth of field. Every image that I had taken was blurry because the effective aperture was f96. Diffraction was just screwing with everything, and so I thought I had a bad copy of the lens. I was just about to go to the camera store and return it until I did one more little bit of research and figured out, it's user error. And I hope that Canon doesn't have that kind of scenario where a lot of people are bad-mouthing the camera because they don't think it's as sharp as it should be, simply because they're not using it right.
Yeah. But that's why I think the new Olympus camera is interesting, that does the 40 megapixel high resolution shot, because what they actually do is move the sensor a half a pixel in 8 different directions.
Yeah, Derrick, I wanted to have you talk about that. So I want to hear what you think about this Canon first, and then tell us about the new Olympus.
Yeah. So I mean, it's funny, and again, diffraction is one of the reasons, but the Canon camera, the thing that interests me, I like the comments I've heard so far. I think is really good. And the other thing is that Canon came right out and said, this is not a video camera, which is the first time we've heard that in a while too, because, I think still photographers are feeling like, God, get off the video thing. Not all of us love video.
Yeah.
And, they said, this is a camera for still photographers. It does shoot video, but it's not even as far as the 5D Mark III in that area. And that we want to design a camera for still shooters, that had some of these features that still shooters want. So I thought that was also kind of, promising that I sort of feel like they're actually listening to their audience a little bit, which, sometimes they're not so good at doing.
Yeah. Well, why, just to bounce it back, why would a photographer need, I mean, I know, I feel like Nicole was saying, you're shooting in the studio or you're doing landscape or food, that kind of thing. Yeah, you want all those, you want as many megapixels as you can get, but that seems like that's maybe kind of niche, and those people seems like they would move more towards a phase 1 back, and use medium format rather than the smaller DSLR feel. Or am I missing something?
No, I think Nicole kind of covered that nicely, in that you have your lens set already, and for those off times when suddenly you did get a billboard assignment or you did get something, then you don't have to change up your gear. You just you got it right there. I would be curious, though. I'm curious about the whole crop factor thing and how that works, because if it's as Don described, which I would suspect he's right about that, then it's not as cool as I hoped it would be.
It just makes a smaller sensor.
Yeah, just you're just using, as you said, less of you're not getting any of the benefit out of it. It seems like, as he was saying, if you're using less of the sensor, well, give us something else too, like increased frame rate or something.
Yeah, you got less stuff to lift than somewhere else.
Come on, So I'd be curious to see how that all shakes out, and I don't have the details on that. Yeah. I think it's an interesting camera, though, and I agree. I'm glad they did it, in part because I felt like they had to do something. I just felt like they had gotten too conservative.
Yeah,
and it's interesting to me. It's an interesting camera. I would like to see what people do with it.
Well, we'll get one in the hands of Mr. Doug K.
There you
all
go.
About the gear show, and let him hammer on it and see what he comes up with. Now, what about this Olympus you're talking about? So 40 megapixels from a tiny sensor? How is that possible?
From a micro four thirds sensor.
Right.
So it's smaller than APS-C, definitely smaller than a full frame.
But bigger than 1 inch, right?
Bigger than 1 inch, exactly. Yeah. And so what they're clever people, as you know, as we're seeing clever stuff from Fuji and Panasonic and all that. You know, there's a lot of smart folks out there playing around right now. So they already have sensor-based image stabilization, and they have 5-axis sensor. So they have had to be working on this technology on, you know, precise sensor movements, you know, and that, because that's the way they stabilize their cameras. And I think one day, someone's sitting around the water cooler and going, hey, you know, we can use this for more than just image stabilization. I mean, we have this precise control over the sensor. And so on the 40 megapixel thing, it's only for objects that aren't moving, right? You know, and the camera has to be on a tripod because it's recording 8 shots in 1 second. And there are limitations. You can only go up to ISO 1600. You can't have an exposure longer than 8 seconds. And you can't stop down any further, to Don's point, than f8. You know, because they gotta corral all these variables, right?
Yeah. Yep.
But what they do is on these 8 shots, they move the sensor a half a pixel in different directions, and then it needs another 2 seconds, and it basically, for lack of a better term, stitches it all together into a 40 megapixel shot, either RAW or JPEG, you know, depending on what you want, or you can do RAW plus JPEG. And it's just kind of
like a lot of engineering, Derrick.
Yeah.
How long does the whole process take if you just, you know, for like, let's say a standard like 1/250th of a second photo?
3 seconds.
Really?
3 seconds. Yeah. 2 seconds for processing, 1 second for the capture.
Now,
So
I think Hasselblad came out with this technology first.
they did.
They had a 50 megapixel camera that you could do this same mojo
Yes.
to get 200 out of it.
Exactly. And so, but you know, that was on a Hasselblad, which, you know,
But I will say, though, that I'm not going to say to everybody, but most people want more megapixels than they need.
Yes.
I don't know. It's a lust we all have for it. We end up not using nearly as much of it. But when you see those bigger numbers, it's a very alluring number to, you know, and we vote with our wallets. There's a lot of people out there buying high megapixel cameras, and that feature will sell a ton of those cameras.
well, and to Nicole's point about the Canon, this is in an $1,100 camera body, the EM5 Mark II, $1,100, which, I mean, the high-end Rebel that they just announced is $850. So, I mean, you know, this is an $1,100 camera body that you already have lenses for, that in certain situations, you know, landscape or in the studio, if you needed it, you could crank out a 40 megapixel.
Landscape on a day when there's no wind or birds or traffic or moving clouds or anything.
Well, I mean, it depends on what you want, Frederick.
I mean, you didn't say anything about it being sharp.
That gives that cool sky, you know.
Yeah, I don't know. What I was saying, it sounds brilliant, the engineering that went into that. And it sounds like, you know, those engineers over there probably see the world like the Matrix, right? It's just, yeah, just zeros and ones.
Have you seen the comparison shots? They're
I did.
compared against the D810, I think, right?
Yeah.
And it's fun. I mean, it's like holding its own. You're going,
yeah, it's crazy. But then again, they were taking pictures of labels on bottles, right?
Yeah.
I don't do that very often. I'm just saying.
You know, the labels on my bottles move.
Yeah, after you consume what's in it.
Yeah.
I love it. See, we're back to the beginning of the show with the rum and from.
Here we go. That's been the whole show, my friend.
I know. That's interesting. Again, so Doug K will have to hammer on that thing and let us know about it. It just seems like a lot of engineering for that feature. When you could go get a camera that's purpose built to do that, and you wouldn't have to make concessions on, you know, it's below 1600 and you have to shoot it at this and put it on a tripod and all that. Just get a camera like this Canon that is designed to shoot, you know, high resolution images, and you don't have to change the way you shoot to, you know, to get them.
But to push back on that, the size of that camera is going to be much bigger than this camera that, you know, that you can just slide into your jacket pocket. And so people who like to shoot mirrorless, and that's all I shot in Cuba, including for video. I'm really glad that, you know, I had what I had there, you know.
Yeah. What did you bring with you to Cuba?
OMD EM10.
Oh, nice. The little one, nice.
Yeah. So I was really
and how many lenses?
I kept it to 5.
So basically, you brought the same DSLR equivalent.
They're little lenses. Just little lenses.
Yes, they are little. They are little.
It's got a couple in each pocket, and you go out and
Derrick.
go
five lenses. I love it.
And then the cigars in the back pocket and a bottle of rum under the arm, and I was happy.
I can see you staggering down a dimly lit Cuban street with your cigar, chugging your rum and snapping a picture every block or so.
Doing the Rain Man thing,
Exactly. Yeah. All right, guys, we got to close this thing off. I want to do our listener Q&A and our picks before we do that. So listener Q&A is, obviously listeners write in with questions that they hope that the crew can answer. This one comes in from Mark Stowe. He says, can anyone help me understand the Canon TTL system? I've tried my best to make it work, but the only thing it seems to do consistently is underexpose my subject. My Nikon, on the other hand, does a great job. Would anyone be willing to shed some light on this? No.
Shed some light.
Right. Sell your Canon, get another Nikon. I don't know.
I was going to say, you answered your own question, Mark. Nicole, what do you think? What's he doing wrong? Is his exposure compensation dial?
Well, it sounds like I don't really use the Canon TTL stuff. I'm mostly using Pocket Wizards with a Alien B strobe if I'm using off-camera system. However, I'm versed in how to use my camera. My guess is check the flash compensation, because you have exposure compensation, you have your flash compensation. They both work exactly the same, but one is going to actually change the exposure of the photograph and the actual exposure of the image, and the other one is going to change the brightness or the darkness of the flash. So that would be my guess based on we don't have a lot of information here. So
yeah,
that's usually
that would be the first. That's like the tech support. Is your computer on, sir?
Yeah. No, I mean, that's not everybody knows about that, and it could be very well that he's using it, but there's something else going on. So
totally.
Check your flash compensation.
Don, you have anything to add to that? Our scientist on the show.
Well, I mean, Canon and Nikon, as far as their fundamental technologies behind their through the lens metering, are basically the same. I'm sure that there are some fine points that are different, but basically the camera is going to send out a pre-flash that when it comes back to the camera, it will, the camera knows how much light was put out and then how much light comes back. And then it uses that to figure out how much light is needed for the full exposure of the flash. That's why when you're using the flash in a manual mode, you actually don't see the flash when you look through the viewfinder, but you do when it's in ETTL or ITTL, because you're seeing the pre-flash in the viewfinder. So both of them are functioning in a relatively similar way. But again, like Nicole said, we don't know what he's photographing. If he's photographing something that's really bright white on the Canon camera, well, then the metering might choose to underexpose it. And if he's choosing to shoot something really dark on the Nikon camera, it might overexpose it, which might be to your liking. And so without knowing the subject matter and what the camera settings are and all the different bits and pieces, it's really hard to give advice. But at the core, both of them will function in very similar ways. So it's got to be something to do with the camera or the subject.
Love it. All right.
And I just want to add one thing to that. I
go for it.
I think what Nicole was saying also is, I would start also at flash exposure compensation, but also a lot of people try to shoot flash photography at like ISO 100. And, and the other thing I would look at is just raise your ISO up a little bit. If you got a high-end camera, you can definitely shoot at ISO 400 or whatever. I don't know what he's shooting either. But, take a little bit of the weight off the shoulders of the flash there, raise the ISO up, and see if you get a little better results too.
Another thing I just thought of is to check whoever's metering mode to see if you have spot meter turned on or evaluative or whatever the words are for, they all have different ways of it. So check that to maybe see if your camera is just metering off of a single pinpoint in your frame versus, trying to get the information from the entire scene. That could make a difference too, in the difference between the Nikon and the Canon cameras.
Perfect. Well, hopefully you guys shed some light on Mark's his underexposed question.
Now we need a follow-up.
His question was underexposed. He didn't give us enough data, right?
I want to see what is actually going on.
Yeah. Well, Mark, if you can give us more data, we'll answer it with better exposure.
And Mark, I want to add, we're just being goofballs today. So
Joseph started it. I was wondering.
We blame it on him because he's not here.
It's actually a really good question, Mark. It's us, believe me.
Mark still rocks.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, listeners, if you have a question you'd like us to not answer on the show, be sure to visit our website.
Hey, we did better than usual on that one.
And
thisweekinphoto.com and click on the submit a question link. And you can also leave us a voice message. All right, guys, we're going to jump into the picks of the week. We're at the end of the show here. This is where you can recommend something to the TWiP audience. Derrick, I'm going to let you go first. What's your pick of the week?
I'm going to keep going with that EM5 Mark II.
You're in love with that thing.
I just think it's a really good camera for those who like to shoot mirrorless. Takes Olympus, Panasonic, and third-party lenses, and they really have beefed up a lot of things on it. And it looks great. If you like the retro look, I think it looks good, too.
All right. And those have like a heft to them, too, right? It's like...
Yeah, it's magnesium alloy and all that good stuff, yeah. And water, they're splash-proof and dust-proof and all that, weather-resistant, shock-proof, all that.
One of the coolest features on those Olympuses, and tell me if this one has that, but my EM5, I guess it's a Mark I, right? So my regular, quote, EM5 has the feature where you can see long exposures draw on the screen as it's doing the exposure.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it has also has the keystoning correction that the EM1 has, so that you can actually move dials and straighten out the buildings while you're looking at them in the viewfinder. It does tethering, does a lot of pro stuff too. It's a really good camera for $1,100.
Does it have a mic input?
It does, and not only does it have a mic input, but now if you get the little grip, which those are the big hands want, they put the headphone monitoring jack in the little grip, so you can have both mic input and headphone monitoring. And it has a fully articulated screen now, not just.
I think Frederick's going to be buying a new camera.
Yeah.
Oh, man. They put all the stuff I want in my cameras in that.
They did. They're working off your list. I saw it in the
and my list is not that crazy. I'm like articulated screen, touch, microphone input, headphone output. That's it.
Yeah, well, that's what they're saying. Why the hell haven't we done this before? I don't know, but thank you, Frederick, for doing that.
Well, thank you, Olympus, for putting blood in the water. Maybe the other manufacturers will get with it.
Yeah.
All right, well, cool, Derrick. Thanks for that. All right, Don Komarechka, what's your pick?
Well, I do a lot of photography outdoors and sometimes at night, and oftentimes, farting around in the dark with my camera, fumbling around, or hearing strange noises off in the woods. I figured it would be good to invest in a decent flashlight to have handy. And so it's sort of tangentially related to photography, but I picked up this guy. It is the SRT7 Revenger from Nightcorp. And one of the benefits of this is if you're doing astrophotography, it has a red mode so that you've got red lights so that you don't hurt your night vision. Yep. But it's really, really bright. Like if I put it on the wall behind me there, this is a very well-lit room. And this flashlight is blindingly bright even in this room. So if you need a lot of light in a very small compact place, there's a lot of really high-powered flashlights that are about this size. Just sits right in your camera bag. Takes rechargeable batteries. You can take a couple of those along as well. I think that it's just a no-brainer that every nature photographer that's working after dark have a good flashlight with them, and there's one for you.
Love it. Very
Flashlights are just so cool. Anyway.
Hey, Derrick, tell me if you're old enough to remember this. Do you remember when Radio Shack, whom is going defunct, by the way? You remember they used to give away flashlights?
Oh, yeah.
You could get the little coupon and take it in, and they would give you a flashlight.
I do remember that. And you know where I got hooked on flashlights? It was X-Files. Man, they had the coolest flashlights on X-Files. And they were always looking after creepy monsters and stuff.
I may have to re-experience X-Files on Hulu.
Yeah.
All right. Well, cool. Thank you for that flashlight pick of the week. We'll link to that in the show notes, Don.
Thanks.
All right, Nicole, what is your... Oh, I see your pick. That is awesome.
This if you're watching the video, you're seeing my massive camera.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Y300. This thing is huge. It's really lightweight, so it's not very... So I can stick this to the top of my camera bag. And, it doesn't really take up much. It's not, very heavy. But I took this with me on a trip to Hawaii. I just got it recently. I got it from Photo Jojo, and I took this is my stack of photos that I took.
Yeah.
But I did this thing I call them Nicolesygrams, hashtag Nicolesygram, where I took a picture and then I did like a picture in a picture thing. But it's very Polaroid-esque. It you know, here, let me, like, I could take a picture, but then it wouldn't develop by the time we're finished here. But you know, it pops out the top here, so you know the photo like kind of pops out right here, and then you take it off and you wait a couple minutes for it to develop. It's a pretty big size, you know, it's not like the little skinny tiny little ones that you can see with some of the other Instax cameras, which is why it appealed to me. But it's like, I think like $130.
Yeah,
so it's
I actually bought one of those.
Yeah, it's not cheap for like, you know, a fun camera, but it's really cool. And it's really great to actually have a print of something.
And you are not going to be inconspicuous with that.
No, you're not. I'm considering taking, so I also have like one of those little Polaroid versions where you can print the photo. It's like a digital kind of print thing.
Like this guy?
I can't see. It's too bright.
Oh, this is the Instax, the Fuji.
Oh, the Instax, yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
no, it's not a Fuji.
SQ1.
I don't have it on me. It's in my office. It's an actual Polaroid camera. I gave it to Brian as a gift. He never used it. So I was like, I'm taking this back. But he lost the charger, so I haven't been able to use it. So I have a charger coming in the mail. But anyway, sorry, I'm kind of...
no, but you know, Nicole, you should tell me your Instagram feed right now, because it's been really cool lately. Because
I've been watching that. Yeah.
It's really hot.
If you go to Instagram, my username is Nicolesy. It's Nicolesy. And yeah, that's kind of, it's like my new series that I've been playing with, but I think I'm going to try and carry this camera around when I'm local, especially. It's really easy to carry because what I do is I take the picture, you know, so let's say I took this picture of my husband who's standing up there on a rock, and then I would hold I'd hold the photo out with my hand, so it kind of looks like this when I'm taking the picture. And I have a Canon 70. I tried to do it with my iPhone, but it's really difficult for me to like hold my giant iPhone 6 Plus and yeah, there we go. There it is.
There he is.
Hold my giant iPhone 6 Plus. So I ended up reverting to my 70D, which also has Wi-Fi. So I was actually able to Wi-Fi it directly to my phone to share on Instagram. So I would just take a picture in a picture, and
that is really cool.
They're really fun. So
Yeah.
are you doing it? I thought you were doing a 365 on that. Or
no, it's not a 365. I've tried like years ago. I tried a 365 and totally failed on that. This is just like
you got to like what, 20 or so?
I think I got a little further than that. But that was before iPhone, so it wasn't easy back then. But no, this is just like, you know, if you look at the photos, I'm actually trying to line up the horizons as much as possible.
It's really neat.
It was like just a fun thing. And I'm sure you'll see more if you follow my Instagram feed. It won't be I did like a whole bunch when I was in Hawaii because we were there to take pictures, but I may take it with me to Thailand in like next month and see if I can get some cool stuff there. And I'm sure you'll see waterfalls with the same series because I live in Portland. But yeah, so anyways, the camera, it's really fun if you're into like kind of retro Polaroid type stuff. It's, you know, I highly recommend it.
I love it. Yeah. That's awesome. And that's a really novel way to like make it, you know, you're taking analog. So you went from digital back to analog, and now you're making a digital again and then sharing that through social. That's
it's like all sorts
dang cool. Pretty dang cool. I love it. Cool. All right. And how much was that, Nicole?
The camera itself is, I think, like $130, and of course you have to buy the film, and I don't recall how much the film is, but it's like maybe $1 to $2 a print, so it's not cheap. Yeah, you know, but it's really kind of a good practice in photography if you've only photographed with digital, because it really makes you think. Like one time, Brian picked up my camera, he turned it to himself, and he took a picture. I was like, no! Like, he's a photographer, so he knows better. It's not like, you know, but
you're like, you're wasting my film.
And at least if you're gonna do that, get better light, you know. So I was like very much like protective of my prints. So
that's good. That's how it was in the old days, right? Yeah. You know, that's cool. Awesome. So that's the Fuji Instax Wide 300. Love it. Cool. And you bought it through Amit Gupta's place over there, Photo Jojo.
Photo Jojo, of course. Yeah. I saw it. I was like a total impulse buy.
Yeah. Well, that's Photo Jojo. People listening and watching this, don't go to Photo Jojo. You will,
unless you want to spend money.
Unless you want to spend money and end up with cool stuff like that.
Yeah,
don't go to Photo Jojo.
They have some really cool stuff there.
Yeah, they do. They do. And if you have a photographer in your life, go to Photo Jojo and buy them something. Anything you buy from there, they will love it. Tell you. All right, guys. My pick of the week is our friends over at the Arcanum. Trey Ratcliffe's outfit over there at thearcanum.com just redesigned their site. So, and I thought they did a really good job of that. So I'm doing a drive people over there to check that out. And that is my pick of the week for the end of the show. All right. We are at the end of another episode of This Week in Photo. I want to thank our sponsors, lynda.com and freshbooks.com, for helping us keep the lights on over here. Joseph Linaschke, you can find him. Geez, where can you find Joseph? I'm not sure what his URL is going to be now. We'll link to it in the show notes for this episode, whatever URL Joseph decides on now that Apple has pulled the rug out from underneath him.
You can just Google Photo Joseph and
Google Photo Joseph, you'll find
he'll show up.
Yeah. Don Komarechka, what about you? Where can people go to track you down?
Well, you can see the constant stream of wintry macro photography that I'm currently up to on Facebook and Google Plus and all of those social media places, but they're all linked to from my website at doncom.ca. So check that out and see what I'm up to.
Very cool. doncom.ca. Cool. And Mr. Derrick Story, what do you got for us? Where can people go?
thedigitalstory.com. So Facebook, Instagram, Flickr, The Nimble Photographer, all that.
All roads lead.
All roads go to Rome there. Yep.
Yeah. What about, how's the Nimble Photographer going?
It's going great. So I just love it. I mean, it's a fun project. And I love having a store. Having a store is so cool. And right now I'm doing fine art cards called Cards of Cuba, you know, and it's just like an impulse thing, and you just do it and put it in the store, and you know, if people want it, they can get it. Yeah, exactly. That's
cool.
I'm having a blast with it. Yeah.
Love it. And Nicole Z, what about you? Where can people go to see some of this cool stuff you got going on?
Well, if you go to NicoleZ.com, it's NicoleSY.com. I'm linked to everywhere else is linked. My online store, I have one as well. Yep. My Instagram, Twitter, Google Plus, Facebook, everything's there.
Yeah, love it. Your online store is very clean, by the way. I love it.
Oh, well, thank you.
It is very representative of you. Your whole site is you. When I look at your site, I'm like, this is so Nicole. It's like
great. Yeah. That's great because, you know, I am my brand and my brand is me. So that's always that's good feedback. Thank you, Frederick.
You're welcome. I feel like I'm visiting you. So very cool. All right. And if you want to check us out, obviously you can check us out at thisweekinphoto.com. And guys, you know what? It's time to take that lens cap off.
There you go. Yay. I hope you got that.
I'm trying to take a picture and it wouldn't let me. Oh, well.
You see, it's not good for spot news. Yeah. I love it.